What would happen if a passenger was humiliated right on the very airline he owned, and within just a few minutes, the entire aviation industry was forced to change because of him? That morning, the first-class cabin of Flight 772 carried a heavy, suffocating sense of luxury. The polished leather seats were lined up perfectly, soft golden lights reflected off the glass tables, glinting on steaming cups of coffee held by a few passengers. Ethan Cross, wearing a worn gray hoodie and simple jeans, sat in seat 1A, the spot everyone envied. At his feet sat an old leather carry-on bag with frayed seams, placed neatly in front of him. He looked like any ordinary passenger, even less remarkable than the people around him, many of whom wore gold watches and spoke with the confident tone of those used to being served. But his eyes told a different story, calm and deep, like a still lake, patiently waiting for the flight to take off. The sharp rhythm of high heels striking the carpet suddenly broke the quiet. Clara Briggs, the head flight attendant, her uniform perfectly pressed without a single wrinkle, bright red lipstick, and an icy stare, strode toward him. She stopped in front of Ethan, her gaze sweeping him from head to toe before pausing on his worn bag. "Sir, this section is reserved for premium first-class passengers," she said, her voice even but laced with a subtle condescension, like a reminder that he didn't belong here. Ethan slowly looked up, his calm gaze making Clara falter for a fraction of a second, though she quickly hid it behind a polite smile. He didn't respond immediately, but instead pulled out his phone, opened the electronic ticket confirmed 3 weeks ago, and placed a gleaming silver Titan Elite card on the small tray in front of her. "I believe I'm in the right seat," he said, his voice low and firm. Clara barely glanced at it, her eyes narrowing slightly as if searching for a loophole. "Perhaps there's been a system error. I'll need to verify additional identification," she replied, her tone polite but her lips curling into a faint smirk. A middle-aged man in a dark blue suit sitting behind Ethan chuckled, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Just look at how he's dressed, clearly sitting in the wrong place," he muttered. Another man laughed, shaking his head in agreement. Clara didn't stop them, even giving a slight nod as if she agreed. Ethan's expression didn't change. His cold gaze met Clara's, unwavering. A woman in seat 3C, visibly disturbed, raised her phone to record, whispering to the person next to her, "He has a Titan Elite card. Why are they still questioning him?" No one answered, but the tension in the air grew thicker. Clara tilted her head, tapping rapidly on her tablet, the sound of her fingers hitting the screen sharp and impatient. She looked determined to find something wrong in the system to prove her point. Curious eyes turned toward Ethan. A few passengers discreetly started recording. Ethan said nothing, offered no explanation, no defense, and certainly no anger. He simply sat straight, his back against the seat, his gaze calm but unyielding, as if everything happening was something he had anticipated. That quiet confidence made some people begin to feel uneasy, because sometimes silence is more intimidating than any argument. Beside him, the red light of phone cameras flashed, and live comments began flooding in. "What's happening in first class?" No one yet realized that what seemed like a minor inconvenience would soon erupt into a storm that would shake the entire airline industry. The sound of Clara Briggs's typing stopped abruptly, her face relaxing into a polite but fake smile. "Sir, the system shows you are not on the first-class list. I have to ask you to move to economy." Her voice was steady, without the slightest hesitation, as if she was used to giving orders to people she deemed unworthy. Some passengers glanced at each other. A low murmur rippled through the cabin. Ethan Cross remained still, his expression unchanged. He picked up his phone, opened the e-ticket he had booked 3 weeks ago with confirmed first-class information, and placed it gently on the tray table, speaking slowly but clearly. "I booked first class. This is verified information. Please check again." Clara didn't even look at the screen, just shrugged dismissively, as if it was merely a stalling tactic. A mocking laugh came from a row behind. The man in the dark blue suit smirked. "Just go to your seat and stop wasting everyone's time." His words drew a few chuckles, and eyes darted toward Ethan, scrutinizing him as if he had just been stripped of his last layer of dignity. Clara nodded to them, smiling in agreement, then raised her hand to her radio, her cold voice echoing through the cabin. "Requesting the captain to come to first class, we have an uncooperative passenger." Within seconds, the sound of hurried footsteps thudded against the carpet. Malcolm Reeves, the flight captain, appeared stiff and imposing, his uniform pressed to perfection, his name badge gleaming, his gaze cutting into Ethan like a blade. "Mr. Cross, is it? This seat does not belong to you. Please cooperate. The flight cannot be delayed because of one person." His calm but firm words struck the already tense atmosphere like a slap. Ethan slowly raised his head, placing the e-ticket in front of Malcolm, his voice deep and commanding. "This is the seat I paid for, with confirmation, with a Titan Elite card attached. If you want to remove me from here, at least prove otherwise." Malcolm glanced at the ticket but didn't take it, instead turning to Clara with a look of silent agreement. "Move him to economy. If he refuses, I'll call security," he said sharply, his tone so strict that a few people in the back shivered. Ethan didn't move. He simply picked up his phone and tapped the record button. "I will document everything," he said, his calm voice unusually steady, each word ringing clearly as if deliberately spoken for everyone to hear. "I, Ethan Cross, who legally purchased a first-class ticket, am being forced out of my seat on Flight 772, Gate 41. This is evidence." A woman in seat 2B suddenly spoke up. "Have they checked his ticket?" Clara snapped instantly. "Ma'am, please remain silent. This doesn't concern you." Humiliation hung over the cabin like a thick fog. No one spoke again, but eyes now followed Ethan's every move. Some passengers had taken out their phones, small flashes blinking under the warm cabin lights. Malcolm crossed his arms, his voice resolute. "I'll give you one more minute to cooperate." Ethan stayed still, quietly glancing at his watch. Time seemed to slow unnaturally, as if everything was waiting for something about to erupt. And no one knew that this very moment would be the spark that ignited a storm, one that would shake not only this first-class cabin, but an entire aviation system once thought untouchable. 1 minute passed, just as Malcolm Reeves had said, and 2 security officers appeared at the entrance of the first-class cabin, walking with measured steps as if they were handling a serious incident. Lucas Trent, a tall man with a stern face, took the lead. Beside him was Maya Chen, younger, her eyes filled with hesitation and unease. Every curious gaze from the passengers followed them, while Clara Briggs stood upright, her face revealing clear satisfaction, as if she had just been proven right. Lucas approached, nodded at Malcolm, then looked at Ethan Cross. "Sir, we were informed that you are not seated in the correct seat. We need to verify your documents," he said in a professional tone without accusation. Ethan did not respond immediately. He calmly reached into his jacket pocket, took out his Titan Elite card and the phone displaying his pre-booked e-ticket, then placed them neatly on the tray table in front of him. "Everything is here. First-class ticket confirmed. Titan Elite membership for 6 years, booked 3 weeks ago," he said slowly, each word clear enough for nearby passengers to hear. Lucas picked up the card, scanned it with his tablet, and after only a few seconds, his brow furrowed slightly before he looked up at Clara. "First-class ticket, fully valid, Titan Elite membership verified for 6 consecutive years. Nothing is wrong." A few murmurs rose among the first-class passengers. A woman whispered, "What did they tell us before?" But Clara remained standing, her lips forcing a tense smile as she tried to maintain composure. "You don't understand," Clara replied, her voice still even but now slightly sharper. "Some people can buy fake cards, and some systems can be tricked. He could be exploiting a loophole." Maya Chen frowned slightly, glancing at Lucas with clear disapproval. Then, unable to hold back, she spoke up. "Clara, did you even check the system? Are you making this conclusion based only on assumptions?" The cabin suddenly fell silent, and the passengers' expressions shifted from curiosity to anger. A woman in the back row exclaimed, "She's discriminating. He showed all valid documents." A man raised his phone high, live streaming, his voice furious as it carried through the cabin. "Do you all see this? This is how they treat a Titan Elite passenger." The hashtag #JusticeForEthan began appearing on several passengers' phone screens. Lucas, still maintaining his professional calm, now looked at Clara with an icy stare. "We cannot force a passenger out of a seat when all documents are valid," he said firmly. But Clara, still clinging to her stance, turned to Malcolm Reeves. "We can't take risks. If he's committing fraud, this flight will face serious issues." Ethan remained seated, showing no sign of anger. His hands were clasped in front of him, his eyes calmly observing each person as if weighing his next move. That silence strangely made the air feel even heavier. Clara Briggs began to lose her composure, while Malcolm Reeves crossed his arms impatiently and signaled Lucas, "Valid or not, escort him down for further verification." Ethan slowly stood, picking up his phone from the tray table. His gaze locked onto Clara, his deep voice resonating throughout the cabin. "I will cooperate, but everyone here will be a witness that a passenger with valid documents was forced out of the seat he paid for." A single clap sounded from the back, followed by whispers of support. Maya Chen stood still, her eyes showing a flicker of shame on behalf of her colleague. As Ethan gathered his luggage, phone lights began to flash, and the live stream viewership skyrocketed. Someone whispered, "This is going to spread fast." No one knew that within minutes, this incident would move far beyond a first-class cabin and become the center of attention for millions. The hallway leading to the boarding gate was unnervingly quiet as Ethan Cross walked between the two security officers. Maya Chen lagged slightly behind, her eyes filled with guilt, while Lucas Trent maintained a calm expression, his head tilted just enough to suggest he was silently memorizing everything in case he needed to testify later. Clara Briggs stood further back, her lips curling into a discreet, victorious smile, and Malcolm Reeves simply crossed his arms, convinced he had followed proper protocol. But the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted entirely. Passengers were filming non-stop, some streaming live, and the small flashing lights of phones sparkled like fireflies against the warm golden glow of the luxurious cabin. As Ethan reached the boarding gate, dozens of eyes turned toward him. Some passengers had stood to watch, whispering among themselves. Veronica Hale, the regional supervisor, approached, holding a tablet, her face serious as though handling a major incident. "Mr. Cross," she said, her voice cold but coated with a thin layer of forced politeness. "Due to technical reasons and to maintain the schedule, you have two options: accept an economy class seat or wait for the next flight. What is your decision?" Ethan stopped, placing his suitcase by his feet, his gaze sweeping the boarding gate area. The scene was unusual. At least 3 passengers were filming, others were secretly taking pictures, and hushed conversations fell silent as he lifted his head. He adjusted his watch slowly, then looked straight at Veronica. His deep voice carried clearly through the still air without needing to be loud. "In 7 minutes, your phone will ring from the CEO's office. I suggest you answer it." His words dropped like a stone into still water. Ripples of murmurs spread across the gate. A curly-haired student whispered to his friend just loud enough for others to hear, "Who is he to be that confident?" A woman nearby started a live stream with the title, "What's happening on Flight 772? Passenger forced out of first class." The number of viewers grew by the second, comments flashing rapidly. "He's definitely someone important. This airline is about to be in serious trouble." Veronica hesitated slightly under Ethan's gaze. Though trying to keep her tone calm, a flicker of irritation showed. "Sir, I don't know what you mean, but we cannot delay the flight for one passenger." That statement immediately drew reactions. A man's voice rose from a nearby seat. "This passenger paid for first class. What more do you need?" A woman added, "I recorded everything. I'll send it to the media if necessary." Lucas Trent glanced at Ethan, a flicker of respect in his eyes, while Maya Chen lowered her head, visibly embarrassed. Ethan, however, remained perfectly still, his hands resting lightly on the suitcase, no unnecessary movements. His calm demeanor only made the tension grow, as if everyone was waiting for something big to happen. Veronica Hale, perhaps trying to maintain appearances in front of the passengers, gave a faint, mocking smile, her voice tinged with sarcasm. "If you believe someone cares about this, feel free to wait." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his deep eyes steady and calm like still water, and replied, "I'm not waiting. I'm giving you one more chance to fix your mistake." At that very moment, a phone rang behind the counter, breaking the heavy silence. A young staff member rushed over, handing the phone to Veronica, his voice shaky. "Priority call from the CEO's office." The boarding gate fell completely silent. Every eye now locked on Veronica, whose initial confidence had vanished. And this was only the beginning. Veronica Hale held the phone with slightly trembling hands, her face struggling to maintain composure while betraying clear unease. Dozens of eyes were fixed on her, many of them behind phones pointed directly at her, recording every gesture, every blink. She cleared her throat softly before lifting the phone to her ear, her voice hesitant. "This is Veronica Hale, regional supervisor." "Yes, he's here." Immediately, a sharp, commanding female voice echoed through the speaker, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear clearly. "Veronica, this is Amanda Ross, CEO of Skylink Airways. I need to speak directly with Mr. Ethan Cross right now." Veronica froze briefly, her eyes darting to Ethan. It was too late to hide her panic. She slowly handed the phone toward him. Ethan didn't rush to take it. He calmly placed his suitcase by his feet, adjusted the sleeve of his worn hoodie, and only then accepted the phone. He pressed the speaker button so everyone could hear. Amanda Ross's voice rang out, crisp and firm, every word cutting through the silence. "Ethan, what is happening? I just received a report. Skylink stock has dropped 2% in the past 45 minutes because this incident is being broadcast live across social media." The boarding gate fell completely silent. Some passengers were so shocked they couldn't close their mouths, while others whispered, "Oh my God, he's Ethan Cross, the big boss himself." A man live streaming nearby lowered his voice in excitement. "Did you hear that? He's the biggest shareholder of this airline." The hashtag #EthanCross flashed rapidly across the screens of those watching the live stream. Ethan scanned the crowd, his gaze sharp like a blade cutting through them. His deep voice remained calm, steady, fully controlled. "Amanda, I was forced out of a first-class seat I paid for in full, in front of dozens of witnesses. 6 consecutive years as a Titan Elite member, ticket booked 3 weeks in advance, yet your staff decided I wasn't qualified to sit there. Tell me, how do you think this will impact the airline's image?" Amanda was silent for a few seconds. Then her voice softened, losing its edge, now urgent. "I apologize, Ethan. I promise to resolve this immediately. We will take care of this situation right now." But Ethan didn't stop there. He leaned slightly toward the phone, his voice firm, each word deliberate. "An apology isn't enough, Amanda. This isn't just an incident. This is a systemic issue. And now everyone here, thousands watching online, will hear how you plan to fix it." A wave of murmurs spread. A woman whispered to her friend, "He's actually forcing the CEO to answer publicly right here." A young man raised his phone to film closer, narrating excitedly to his audience, "This is turning into history, people!" Veronica Hale stood frozen, her face pale. Clara Briggs, standing further back, began to edge away, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, while Malcolm Reeves stood stiffly, his hands clasped as if awaiting judgment. Ethan stood tall, his hands steady as he held the phone, his voice cutting through the heavy air, each word like a hammer striking the silence. "Amanda, this is your moment to show me whether Skylink truly deserves to remain in the hands of its current leadership." The space was utterly silent, every person waiting for her response. A young passenger whispered to the person beside him, "I've never seen anyone dare do this right at the boarding gate." And in that moment, every phone was raised higher, more lights flashing, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing a moment that would change the history of this airline forever. Amanda Ross's voice came through the speaker, this time stripped of the confidence expected from the CEO of a major airline. "Ethan, I will handle this internally right away. We can discuss the details later." She hadn't finished when Ethan cut her off, his deep voice pressing into the air with each deliberate word. "No, we will discuss it right now, here, in front of these witnesses and the millions watching live. Amanda, you don't have the luxury of delay. Every second that passes is another second Skylink stock loses value. A wave of excited murmurs rippled through the boarding gate. Some passengers gasped as if they were watching a high-stakes match where the lead player was controlling the game flawlessly. On the other end, Amanda Ross was clearly restraining her frustration, her voice now careful, cautious. "What do you want, Ethan?" Ethan placed the phone on the counter, turning up the volume so everyone could hear. He turned slowly to face Clara Briggs, Malcolm Reeves, and Veronica Hale. His voice was steady, not rushed, but every word sharp as a blade. "I want 5 things, and I want them done within 72 hours. 1. Clara Briggs and Malcolm Reeves are to be terminated immediately for abuse of authority and for causing severe damage to the airline's reputation. No warnings, no transfers, terminated with an official statement. 2. All customer service staff and flight attendants must undergo mandatory anti-bias training, a minimum of 8 hours, starting this month. 3. Establish an anonymous reporting system for customers and employees to report any discriminatory behavior. 4. Create a service reform fund of $500,000, managed by an independent organization. And 5, he paused, his sharp gaze sweeping across the entire boarding gate, making everyone hold their breath, then delivered the final demand. 20% of all executive bonuses will be tied to the Passenger Fairness Index with quarterly public reporting. If the target is not met, they do not get paid. The gate erupted in murmurs. A woman live streaming whispered excitedly, "He's rewriting the rules right here." A young man laughed with exhilaration. "We're watching history being made." On the other end, Amanda Ross stayed silent for a few seconds, a silence so heavy it felt like the entire space had stopped breathing. Veronica Hale stood frozen, her eyes wide. Clara Briggs bit her lip so hard it turned pale, while Malcolm Reeves stared at the floor, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Lucas Trent stood firm, a flicker of admiration in his eyes, while Maya Chen exhaled quietly as if a long-suppressed weight had finally been lifted. Finally, Amanda's voice came back, slower now, no longer commanding but clear and deliberate. "I agree to all the demands." Applause broke out from one corner of the gate, first scattered, then quickly spreading until the entire space joined in, a unified wave of clapping. A man raised his phone higher, shouting, "This is the day Skylink changes!" Ethan didn't smile. He simply nodded slightly, his voice calm but still carrying the weight of authority. "Good. I'm not seeking revenge. This isn't about punishing individuals. It's about fixing a system that has grown accustomed to judging people based on prejudice. Amanda, make sure your employees understand from now on, respect is not an option. It is mandatory." Veronica swallowed hard, her face pale, while Clara lowered her head and stepped back slowly, trying to avoid the stares burning into her. A woman sitting by the window whispered to her friend, "He's not just defending himself, he's changing an entire industry." And in that moment, everyone in the space understood. A storm had just been unleashed, and it would sweep away the oldest, most rigid parts of this system. 3 days later, the headquarters of Cross Ventures in Chicago carried an unusually solemn atmosphere. Sunlight reflected off the towering glass walls, casting its glow over the oak desk where Ethan Cross sat, his fingers turning page after page of a thick report. Everything had unfolded exactly as he demanded. Clara Briggs and Malcolm Reeves had been officially terminated for severe violations of service standards. Copies of these decisions had been sent to every Skylink employee, with no attempt to disguise or justify their misconduct. Ethan placed the first report aside, his gaze lingering on the numbers flickering across his computer screen. In just the first 24 hours, the new anonymous reporting system had received 42 submissions regarding previous misconduct, most of them from employees who had once feared retaliation. The anti-bias training program had also begun at 6 a.m., right on schedule as he required, with images of hundreds of attendants in their crisp blue uniforms lining up outside training rooms circulating widely on social media. The caption most frequently shared under those photos was the new slogan he had ordered printed across every boarding gate: Respect is not a choice, it is a rule. Maria, Ethan's longtime assistant, entered the room carrying another stack of documents. The press is saying this is the first time in Skylink's history that a crisis has been turned into reform in just 3 days, she said, her tone professional but her eyes revealing clear admiration. Ethan didn't answer it immediately. He sat silently for a moment, his gaze fixed on a framed photo hanging on the wall, a Skylink plane taking off, with the old slogan underneath, "Excellence in every flight." His lips curved slightly and he murmured, "Excellence doesn't come from leather seats or champagne. It comes from how we treat every single human being." Maria stood still for a moment before continuing her report. The Service Reform Fund has been established and handed over to an independent supervisory body, and they've already begun approving the first projects. And you should know, ticket sales have risen by 15% in just 2 days. People are starting to call Skylink the fairest airline in America. Ethan gave a subtle nod, not showing excitement or triumph, his eyes calm, yet carrying that familiar spark of determination. "We're only getting started, Maria. Real reform isn't about a few posters or polished press conferences. I want this system monitored constantly. Every report must be treated as a serious case. The old mistakes are never to be repeated." Maria smiled faintly, placed the documents on his desk, and left the room, leaving Ethan alone. He turned his chair toward the massive glass window, staring out at Lake Michigan shimmering under the golden evening light. The streets below were alive with moving cars and people, and in the sky above, several Skylink planes passed by, now painted with the updated logo, a small phrase running along the fuselage. "Dignity is not optional, ton trong la bat bok." Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second as if to etch this moment into memory, then opened them again with a resolve sharper than ever. Deep down, he knew a storm had only just begun, and he would be the one to lead it. Not out of revenge, but because it was time to rebuild an aviation industry that finally learned to bow to what was right. 2 months later, the Grand Hall of the National Civil Rights Conference in Washington was nearly filled to capacity. More than 800 people occupied every seat, from social activists, business leaders, and lawyers to pilots and flight attendants from various airlines. The stage lights illuminated brightly as Ethan Cross walked out in a simple gray suit. He needed no grand introduction, no words of praise. His mere presence was enough to send the room into a thunderous applause. Ethan raised his hand, signaling for silence, then began speaking in a calm, clear voice that carried an undeniable power of persuasion. 8 weeks ago, a man was forced out of a first-class seat he had legally purchased, simply because employees decided he didn't deserve to sit there. That man was me. The room went silent. Ethan pressed a small remote, and a sharp, clear chart appeared on the large screen behind him, showing that discrimination complaints in the airline industry had dropped by 68% in just 8 weeks. He continued, "These numbers didn't come from pretty apologies, they came from real change. Skylink turned a crisis into an opportunity, and I call on every other airline to do the same. Fairness is not a choice, it is a duty." Applause began to ripple through the hall, slowly growing louder, but the most dramatic moment had yet to come. A side door to the stage opened, and a woman walked out, causing a stir among the audience. It was Clara Briggs. She wore a simple black dress, the arrogance of the former chief attendant gone, replaced by a serious expression, and a voice trembling yet firm. "I am the one who stood in front of Mr. Cross that day. I judged him based only on his appearance. I lost the job I loved most, but I realized I needed to do more than just apologize. I am now training new staff on how to treat customers with genuine respect, so no one repeats my mistake." A wave of emotion surged through the hall. Some people stood, clapping continuously. Clara bowed her head slightly, while Ethan gave her a small nod, his gaze not filled with anger but with acknowledgement. He turned back to the microphone, his tone softer but still strong. "Change doesn't start by firing someone. It starts when those who were wrong are willing to stand up and make things right." Ethan pressed another button, projecting a handwritten letter onto the screen, its carefully written lines displayed for all to see. "I watched that live stream at the gate. 2 years ago, I was thrown off a train because I didn't look like someone who could afford a ticket. After seeing what you did, I stood up and told my story, and I started building a database of discrimination cases in public transportation. I named it Gate 41. Layla Hampton, 21 years old, Boston. The hall was silent for a few seconds, then erupted into endless applause. A social activist in the front row whispered to the person beside him, "This is no longer just about an airline. This is a movement." Ethan looked across the hall, his eyes meeting those of everyone from silent CEOs to uniformed airline employees recording the moment on their phones. He delivered his final words, his voice firm and resolute. "We cannot change history with apologies. We change it with action starting now." Applause thundered like a storm, so loud that even people standing outside the hall began chanting his name. Ethan only bowed his head slightly in thanks, no triumphant smile on his face, because to him, this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new era of fairness in the airline industry. That afternoon, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the glass buildings of Washington, Ethan Cross walked slowly out of the Grand Hall. The sound of applause and chants of his name still echoed behind him, but he did not look back. To Ethan, those claps were not the destination. They were simply a sign that the world had begun to listen. Outside, dozens of students stood in a long line, holding signs written in bold black marker. "You gave us tools, not just words, you gave us tools, not just words." A young blonde woman, her eyes shining with determination, lifted her sign higher as he passed. Ethan paused briefly, met her gaze, and gave a rare smile. Not a smile of victory, but a smile of trust. He did not walk straight to the car as others expected. Instead, he approached the group of students, shaking hands with each of them, his eyes serious and sincere. A young man held his hand tightly and said softly, "You didn't just save an airline, you made an entire generation believe they can change something." Ethan replied in a low, calm voice, "I didn't change anything. You are the ones who will do that." A young reporter followed closely, holding up a recorder. "Mr. Cross, many people are calling for you to run for the Senate or even higher. Have you considered that?" Ethan stopped, turning to look directly into the flashing camera lens. His face was serious, but his voice was strangely calm. "I am not a hero, and change does not need heroes. It needs systems built the right way so that people do the right thing, even when no one is watching." That answer spread instantly across social media. The live stream of the conference reached more than 1 million views in just a few hours, and quotes from his statement flooded Twitter and TikTok, filled with inspired comments. "We don't need more slogans, we need systems like the ones he is talking about." Ethan Cross is not a politician. He is laying the foundation for a new era. As the evening fell, Ethan left the crowd and walked toward the black car waiting for him. But instead of getting in immediately, he stopped and looked up at the sky where planes were taking off. On the side of a passing Skylink aircraft, the new slogan shimmered under the airport lights. "Dignity is not optional, respect is mandatory." He watched until the plane disappeared into the clouds, then finally turned away, the car door closing softly behind him. In that moment, there were no cheers, no applause, only a man sitting quietly, his eyes not those of someone who had finished a mission, but of someone preparing for the battles ahead. Deep down, Ethan knew one truth. Real change does not happen in a single day, or in a single conference. It begins in the hands of ordinary people when they decide not to accept what is wrong ever again. And he would continue, not to become a hero, but to give those people the tools they need to rewrite their own story. From a business perspective, Ethan Cross proved an important truth. Real change does not begin with apologies, but with creating systems that force people to respect one another, whether or not anyone is watching. This story is not just a lesson for the airline industry, but for any organization that wants to endure, because trust is the most valuable asset. If you also believe that respect is not a choice, but a mandatory rule, hit Hit like and subscribe to help spread inspiring stories like this one. And don't forget to leave a comment with the 3 words "respect comes first," because that is the very first thing we need to change the world.